So it is my very great pleasure to introduce our first returning speaker, the fantastic Kate Slack. Kate is head gardener at Marble Hill, and with her gardening volunteers has created and curated the pleasure gardens, which she talked about in a previous talk for us, and you can find on the YouTube channel. So without further ado, I will bring in the amazing Kate Slack.
Thank you. That was quite an introduction. Hello, everyone, and I'm really excited to be here to talk to you about biodiversity at Marble Hill Park and what we're doing to increase the biodiversity. I will just share the screen so that you can. Okay, here we go. So I'm here to talk about biodiversity at Marble Hill Park. I'm not an ecologist, I'm a head gardener, but I have some knowledge about wildlife and biodiversity. And what we're trying to do as part of the project to increase biodiversity at Marble Hill Park. These are some of the photos of wildlife we have at Marble Hill Park, and some of them are after the project. So you can see the little great tit on the right who's inhabited the bird boxes that we're putting up in the park. So firstly, I'll just talk a little bit about what biodiversity is, and it's really the variety of life on Earth. It's a big subject, and I can't talk about it in great detail, but it basically is about all life on Earth, and that is about sort of going down to something as small as genes, to individual species, to communities of creatures, and to entire ecosystems. Biodiversity is something that is in the news a lot at the moment. We are apparently in the middle of the 6th mass extinction of species on Earth. Scientists have discovered something like 1.7 million species on the planet, but they reckon that there are something like 8 to 9 million species, which means there are about 7 million species that we haven't yet discovered. Which is quite incredible, and the fact that a lot of those species are going extinct before we've even discovered them or know anything about them. So biodiversity is important because we need a massive variety in different species in order to keep a sustainable ecosystem going. And also, one of the important things about it is there are billions of different interactions between different species that have evolved over millions of years, which keep a finely tuned ecosystem. Something as simple as grazing cattle on a field, the fact that they produce manure, which goes back into the grass, which goes back into the bacteria in the soil, and that in turn feeds the grass, which feeds the cattle again. So it's these kind of interactions that are really important. That's a very simple example, but there are literally billions of these interactions. A lot of them we don't know anything about. So when you take something out of an ecosystem, that doesn't work properly as it should do. But equally, if you put something into the ecosystem that isn't native, such as Japanese knotweed or grey squirrels, it really throws that finely tuned balance out of kilter. An example of which, in a single spoonful of soil, which basically provides 90% of our food, can contain up to 10,000 to 50,000 different types of bacteria. Some of these bacteria are beneficial, some are not, but there's a whole entire ecosystem going on in the soil. A lot of it we don't know about, but it feeds into the entire food chain and into how that ecosystem works smoothly. So having a lot of biodiversity in an ecosystem makes it a healthy ecosystem, and a healthy ecosystem means we have a healthy, sustainable planet. Pre the project, the woodland quarters had been left for about 30 years. We had a lot of invasive species in those woodland quarters. If you look at the top left-hand photograph, all the plants along the front here was snowberry. This was really invasive. It runs through suckers and it just was invading a lot of the woodland quarters. Down on the bottom left-hand photo is laurel. We had a lot of laurel in there. And you can see that the woodlands were quite dark. There was very little in flowering there. And really, biodiversity-wise, it was very poor. So the aims of the project in terms of biodiversity, excuse me, were to increase the diversity and the quality of the habitats across the site. They were quite poor quality habitats in the woodland quarters, and that was part of the project to try and increase the quality of the habitat for wildlife. Also, we were intending to improve the connectivity across the site. So there's something called green corridors, which are corridors that wildlife move along. So this can be hedges, it can be rivers, it can be fields or long grass areas, but we intended to improve these green corridors so that wildlife could move around the park more easily, but also this connects the different areas on either side of Marble Hill Park, because the whole of the Thames is a green corridor. And we wanted to provide conditions that are suitable for the biodiversity action plan, so that we were part of the solution rather than being part of the problem. And another part of the project is that monitoring. So by monitoring what we're doing and monitoring the different species of wildlife that are coming into the park, we know whether we're being successful or not. And it means we can learn from it. So as part of the project, we planted 342 new trees. These are in the forms of avenues, groves and woodlands. We've planted 47 elms, 43 limes, 34 oaks, 54 poplars, 24 Indian chestnuts, 25 ulnas, 7 hornbeam, sweet chestnuts, beech, tulip trees, fruit trees, sorbus, planes and yew trees. This isn't an exhaustive list of the trees that were planted, but it's just to give you a bit of an idea of the different species that we're planting. So we are introducing species that are beneficial for wildlife in lots of ways, whether it be flowers for pollinators or fruit for different types of mammals and birds. The photograph in the background is of our volunteers planting up the orchard on a very misty November day. The first set of trees to be planted were the avenue trees. These were chosen carefully, both for the look of them, but also because of the benefits for wildlife. The top right-hand photograph is a photograph of the trunk of a black poplar. The black poplar is very rare in the UK at the moment, but it's considered to be rarer than the giant panda. This is because although it was used for centuries for lots of different things, for timber, it was found on the Mary Rose as timber, but it grew out of popularity because other varieties were found that were quicker growing. But it's very important for wildlife because there are lots of different types of moth feed on the black poplar. So we've planted 24 black poplars as part of the avenues. The middle photograph at the top is a constable painting, and these are actually black poplars in the background. But you see very few of those these days in the landscape because it is quite rare. And the bottom photograph is the black poplars which were planted. They're starting to establish very well, and they actually look absolutely beautiful in the landscape. The middle photograph of the flowers is the Indian horse chestnut. This is Aesculus indica. So these are going to be the main closest avenues to the house, and this will frame the view running down from the river to the house. Historically, in Henrietta's time, it would have been horse chestnut, but horse chestnut is very prone to canker these days, and we have it in the park, so we couldn't choose horse chestnut. Indian horse chestnut is very similar. The flowers on it, you get these lovely pink candelabra flowers that you get on horse chestnut. It flowers later than the our own horse chestnut, but it still has that lovely effect, and it will frame the view beautifully. But also the flowers will provide a lot of pollen for wildlife and pollinators. And the last photograph is of the white poplar, which we planted. Again, poplars are very good for lots of different types of moths which feed on them and like to lay their eggs on them. So these trees were chosen specifically for the benefits for wildlife, but also for the fact that they will look beautiful in the landscape. If you look at the bottom left-hand photo, you can see the contrast between the white and the black poplars, and this will make for a really lovely effect. It is already looking beautiful, but in the future, when it is established, it will look beautiful, but also be very good for wildlife. We've also planted a number of fruit trees as part of the project. This is the orchard. It's a stone fruit orchard, so it's things like damsons, greengages, plums and cherries. This is going to add a great deal of benefit for wildlife, because not only will the fruit trees blossom in the spring, so they'll provide a great deal of blossom, but then the fruits are going to be left on the trees for mammals, for birds, for them to eat. I'm sure we will get a few people scrumping them, but that's fine. People are engaging with wildlife, so all the better. But this will provide pollen that wasn't there before, lots of blossom and a lot of interest for different types of wildlife. Hedging. So as part of the project, we're really massively trying to increase the number of different hedges in the park, and also this improves the connectivity for wildlife. We're planting lots of different native hedging, so we're increasing the number of species of hedges we're planting about, I'd say, 6 different species of hedges, a lot of which weren't in the park before, and this provides again more food and diversity for different types of wildlife. The type of hedges that we're planting is hawthorn, which is absolutely fantastic for wildlife. It has the blossom throughout May. It produces the berries later in the autumn. We're planting hornbeam, which will provide good shelter for different types of birds and mammals in the winter. And we're also doing quite a lot of dead hedging in the park as well. So not only do the hedges provide food for pollinators, but also food for birds and mammals, but also shelter in the winter. So we're providing different types of habitats, which is really important to provide that habitat for wildlife. And we're trying to increase the difference in different habitats for the different types of variety of wildlife. The woodland quarters, so the richest habitats in terms of the UK really are woodland edges. And this is because 2 different habitats meet. So you have the woodland where it's shady, there's lots of places for birds to nest and to shelter. But because it connects with the edge of the woodland where you have sunlight, you tend to get a real richness and diversity of different plants. And this is what we're trying to achieve in the woodlands. So if you've been through Marble Hill, you've probably seen the beautiful wildflower meadows at the moment. We're in full blossom, but because they're next to the woodlands, it provides that diversity of habitat, which is really important. So birds and mammals can shelter in the woodland, but they can come out into the meadows. The meadows in themselves will attract lots of different pollinators, lots of different insects. These will provide food for the birds, and it's this connection between habitats where you get the real rich diversity of plants and animals and different types of species. And this is what we've tried to achieve with the woodland quarters. Quarters that I'm talking about. So the house is the grey square in the middle. The right hand top woodland quarter is where the orchard is, and you can see there's the row of the trees, and the back is going to be woodland and native shrubbery. We've done the same with the ice house quarter, which is the left top hand one, and this is quite a woodland quarter, but you will come out into this wildflower meadow. And again, we're increasing the different habitats. So we're trying to encourage different types of wildlife into the park and a different type of diversity, which wasn't in these woodland quarters before. So the types of plants that we're planting in the woodland quarters are going to be flowering evergreen shrubs, which are really good for birds and mammals because they flower in the summer and the spring. They'll provide food in form of nectar and berries. And then in the winter they'll die, but a lot of them will keep the leaves on. So it provides really good shelter for lots of different types of birds and mammals. This is something that wasn't there before. So we've massively increased the food and the habitat and the shelter for as much wildlife as we can encourage into these areas. Also, we're increasing the number of flowering plants. Again, this wasn't, if you've been to Marble Hill before, there were very few flowering plants. And this is great for the different types of pollinators, such as bees and butterflies and things like that. We're really hoping to encourage these insects into the park. And once we have the insects in the park, that's more food for the birds and it's more food for mammals. So by increasing lots of different species of flowers and plants, we're hoping to attract a diversity of insects into the park. The wildflower meadows are a big part of how we're trying to increase biodiversity. These are the areas that we are trying to increase the number of species of flowers in the park. It is around the edges. As you know, Marble Hill Park is a sports park as well as a public park. So we can only do this around the edges, but we're trying to really increase wherever we possibly can the different, the wildflower and the long grass areas. And this is really important for wildlife because 97% of our wildflower meadows have died out since the Second World War. And it really is a disaster for a lot of insects. And by letting the grass grow long, by increasing different flowering plants into that, we're hoping to provide food for a range of pollinators and insects. Last summer, about this time, I think it was in July, we tried to increase the species in the bottom half of the park in the long grass meadows. We had a moving meadows day. So what we did is we collected hay from Ham House, which very kindly gave us their hay, and they have a very rich meadow which is full of lots of different species of flowers, and it's been established for a couple of 100 years. The bottom right-hand photo is bird's foot trefoil, which they have a lot on, and this is particularly good for butterflies. We did it, basically all of it was carbon neutral, the method we used. So we went across on the boat with the volunteers, we took the big ton bags, we collected the hay into the ton bags, we brought it back on the boat and we spread it on our long grass areas, hoping to achieve increase in the plant species that we have at Marble Hill Park. And we're aiming to try and have as rich a meadow as Ham House, but as theirs has been established for 200 years, I think we will have a while to wait. But this is a start to trying to improve our plant species list at Marble Hill Park. The very last part of the project is going to be the Sweet Walk. So this is from the lodge, White Lodge, as you walk down in from the Richmond Road. Again, there's going to be a lot more flowering plants than there ever have been in the park before, and you will be able to walk through and see and smell all the different plants. But this is also fantastic for lots of different birds, bees and butterflies, to have this range of different flowering plants to feed off in the summer and the spring months. The London Wildlife Trust supported us doing this. It recognised, so it said the proposals have implemented set out should result in a net gain for the biodiversity in the medium term. So new plantings, which we've done a lot of, and securing changes to more biodiverse sympathetic management regime, which should enhance the wildlife interests of Marble Hill Park, as well as making the broader mosaic of green spaces in the environs more ecologically connected and resilient. It should enhance the quality of the existing site of local importance for nature conservation that may in time, if managed appropriately, be upgraded to borough importance. And this is really what we're trying to aim at. We really want to upgrade Marble Hill Park to borough importance in terms of the biodiversity, the wildlife that we have there, and the different species of insects and birds and mammals that we have. Also, as part of this, it's really important that we monitor how we're doing. So we are monitoring the different types of birds in the woodlands. We have some volunteer bird monitors who sit in the woodlands and try and identify all the different birds we have there. We've started butterfly transects this summer. So this involves volunteers walking around and identifying every single week which type of butterflies we have. And we are trying to increase the different types of plants in the long grass areas. But it's very important that we monitor it, otherwise we don't know whether we're getting it right. We need to know if we are getting it right and what we can do to improve, and surveying the park is a really important part of this. So what can you do? It is important. Part of why we're losing biodiversity is mainly because of habitat destruction. And this 97% of our wildflower meadows have been destroyed, and that is because of habitat destruction. Partly it is climate change and partly pollution, but habitat destruction is one of the main reasons why we're losing this biodiversity. But you can actually do something yourself. Even if you have a small backyard, you can leave your lawn longer in summer and spring. There is a thing called No Mow May these days. So it basically means don't mow your lawn until June. And you'll be surprised if you do it. You will be surprised the number of different flowering plants you have in your lawn. If you can always mow a path through it, but it is providing that habitat, which is crucial for the wildlife that we're losing at the moment. You can try leaving an area of your garden for wildlife. So just leave a corner, even if it's brambles, they're fantastic for wildlife. Leave a little corner for wildlife. And don't be too tidy a gardener, which is good news if you don't particularly like gardening. Nature does actually like a mess, and it's our instinct to tidy things up, but that doesn't mean it's good for nature. So a pile of logs or twigs might look a mess to you, but it might look like a 5-star hotel to a hedgehog. So it's about getting people to understand that you can leave areas and it is really beneficial to wildlife, and you can create habitats in your own back garden for wildlife. Avoid using pesticides and herbicides if possible. I know sometimes it's very annoying having the slugs eat all of your petunias, but if you use slug pellets, it's very, very bad for birds. So do what you can to try and avoid using them. Just leave log piles. Water holes are great for all types of wildlife. Add bird boxes and driveways. Driveways are a big way that we have sort of gotten rid of a lot of our green spaces. So try and have a green driveway if you can. There are ways of making a driveway, but also having plants in it. So there are ways that everybody can do something to try and regenerate this habitat destruction for wildlife. And it's very much part of what we're trying to do at Marble Hill Park, is increase the different variety of insects and birds and mammals into the park, so that we're trying to create this ecosystem, which in turn will link up all the rest of the Thames and all those green spaces along the Thames. And that's it. So I'll stop sharing my screen and take any questions.
That was wonderful. Thank you. I will. I guess I will start off by giving you a rather long question so that you can rest your voice. Um, we're starting very, very small. You said in the presentation there was 10,000 to 50,000 different types of bacteria in a spoonful of soil, which brings me to pants, apparently. There's a project that's going on which is to dig down and bury cotton pants in the soil and then dig them up in 8 weeks' time as a measure of how healthy the soil is. Do you have
Okay.
an overview of the soil health in Marble Hill Park, whether through using cotton pants or more scientific methods?
Well, we haven't buried cotton pants in Marble Hill Park, but it's a very interesting concept. No, but we have had soil tests, obviously, before we started the survey. And hopefully I mean, we're mulching like mad in the woodlands. By doing this, we're introducing beneficial bacteria to these areas. We haven't actually done a test for the different type of bacteria in the soil in Marble Hill Park. But yeah, the pants thing is something that I will note.
And it's presumably very varied between the drier, higher spots in
It
front of
is.
the house.
So it was a flood plain at one point. It hasn't flooded for a long time. Part of that is the fact that the towpath was built between the river and Marble Hill Park. But back in Henrietta's time, it would have been a common occurrence for the Marble Hill Park to flood. And they would have had appropriate plants there. So there are a lot of plants that will grow on a floodplain. The poplars being one, black poplars would have loved a floodplain. So it is appropriate for that site.
And I've noticed with some of the trees that have been cut down or have fallen down over the years, you seem to have these hedgehog hotels. Is that part of the everyday management of the park to actually make sure there are places where
Yes. So
decay?
yeah, I mean, a lot of the wood that we've chopped down, we're trying to reuse, and decaying wood is a really important part of biodiversity, because there are a lot of sort of different fungi that grow on decaying wood, lots of different insects that eat decaying wood. So by leaving that wood in the woodland, it's very good for diversity. But yeah, again, you're right, it's good for hedgehogs and anything like that. It's providing a habitat. So we're trying to reuse as much of the stuff that we can in the park.
We've got a very interesting one about how is the bat population in the park holding up over the past couple of years? We're next door on the Meadowside estate and think numbers are declining here. However, the estate's management have been cutting our previously glorious meadow. Is this the cause, or is the decline more general? This is from Gavin. Very
I can't answer for a specific site. We do bat tours. We've have an ecologist who comes in to monitor the bat population. It tends to be quite healthy in that area because of the river. So obviously the insects are flying, tend to be over the river, and the bats fly back and forward over the river. But as far as I know, it's fairly healthy, the bat population at the moment. And we're putting in bat friendly lighting, so it's not going to disturb their flying patterns. And the increase in the wildflower meadows means there'll be more insects, but this is good for bats. So by increasing the number of flowering species, we increase the insects, and hopefully we increase the food for the bats. I don't know if that answers that question. I can't.
And am I right in thinking this is all part of this same green corridor with the, I guess, Kew Gardens as well, and the Hamlands?
Yes, so it runs all the way along the river. You've got a ham house across the road. You've got Orleans Park next to us. It is quite green all the way along the river. So, I mean, that's a blue corridor because of the water, but on either side of the blue corridor is the green corridor on either side. So it's a very good environment for for bats.
Fantastic. Are there any other non-native plants that have been introduced to boost biodiversity? You mentioned the Indian horse chestnut earlier, but I think in a previous talk you mentioned a Himalayan cultivar of a tree, I believe.
Yeah, that's the Indian horse chestnut. So it's Aesculus indicate, yeah. But it isn't invasive. This is the problem if you introduce non-native plants. It doesn't necessarily have to be native to benefit wildlife, as long as it has pollen and berries or fruit afterwards. It's if it's an invasive species, then it will basically take over and dominate and stop native species from growing. So we have chosen the species that were planted very carefully. We're not introducing anything that's invasive, and we've chosen them so that they are flowering and they are fruiting or setting berries. But anything we have introduced which is non-native is going to improve the habitat for wildlife.
And are you hoping to attract any particular trophy species?
Oh, yes, we are actually. We're at the moment, we're in the middle. We're very keen on butterflies at the moment. We had a wonderful guy come and show us how to do butterfly transects. And we're really hoping to introduce, I think it's the brown hair streak butterfly. And we're going to try and plant as much blackthorn as we can, because that's what they feed off. So it's great having people like that who come and tell us, well, if you plant this, you will get this. So that is going to be our trophy species. It's not a particularly attractive butterfly, but it's quite rare. And we would be absolutely delighted if we could attract those butterflies into the park. That would be amazing.
And what's the process for that? It's purely you are laying the groundwork so that they would have a habitat if they were in the area.
Yes, they are in the area apparently, in Surrey and West London, parts of Surrey and West London, but they are quite specific what they feed off. So blackthorn is something that they feed and lay their eggs off. So I'm hoping that if we plant a hedgerow of that we will encourage it into the park.
Wonderful.
Yes.
We have a question about the tulip tree, which I was not aware of. Could you tell us more about it?
Tulip tree.
Apparently so.
Well, tulip tree is called Liriodendron tulipifera, and it is from North America. And it's an absolutely beautiful tree. It takes a long time to establish. It takes up to 20 years before it flowers, but it is a gorgeous tree and good for wildlife. It has a wonderful flower. Yes, and was there anything specific?
I think that was possibly just Rachel.
Yes, Rachel will love that. It has a wonderful, actually, it has a flower like a tulip, which is basically why it's called a tulip tree.
Well, I believe we mentioned earlier the snapdragons. So I feel like I should bring out my vested interest in snapdragons.
Okay.
You mentioned in the rehearsal that you've got thousands of them. Is that correct?
We have about 1,000 snapdragons, yes. They were sown by the volunteers and pricked out, and they are in the flower garden at the moment. So if you're passing the flower garden, have a look. It's really full of colour, and snapdragons are a wonderful flower, I think particularly for children, because you squeeze them and it literally opens and it looks like a dragon. But also the bees love them as well, and you can see them going in pollinating, and all you see is the little bee bottoms sticking out of the flower as they're in there getting the nectar. So I would love it to be the icon of Marble Hill Park, because it's wonderful in so many ways, and we have planted 1,000 of them. So, yeah.
And with these gardens in particular, the flowering gardens, I imagine you would advise people to make a daily trip to Marble Hill, but would they expect to see a big change week to week?
Yeah, well, especially at the moment, because the meadows are in flower at the moment. And that's the thing about these perennial wildflower meadows that we're growing. They change through the season. So at the moment we have oxide daisies, and they're slowly starting to die back. They're only really good for flies. They have an awful smell. They actually do smell like dog poo. So it's not, it looks beautiful, but it's not particularly scented. But now as they're starting to die back, the wild carrot is taking over. So all through the weeks, if you visit, you'll see the change, particularly in the wildflower meadows, as the different flowers come through the seasons and the colour changes. And then we'll be cutting it down at the end of August, September. So you will see changes throughout the park if you come weekly. Yeah.
You said wild carrot. I assume you don't want foragers digging up your garden straight away.
It's not edible, so you would get a minuscule, yeah. So no, we don't want foragers digging up the wildflower meadows. Thank you, Sam.
Probably a good distinction. That's fantastic. We also mentioned the Operation Centaur.
Yes.
I believe
it's reminding me.
The wild meadows. So
yeah. So I forgot. Thank you for reminding me. So we're not doing the green hay method this year for the wildflower meadows. I'm very excited that we've got Operation Centaur in to cut them. This is an organisation, and they use shire horses to cut the meadows, and they cut the meadows over at Ham House. And it's a much more sympathetic way to cut wildflower meadows. You don't have heavy tractors running back and forward over the area. They can get into smaller areas and round trees without damaging the tree roots. And it's a traditional way to cut wildflower meadows. And it is much more beneficial to the plants in those areas. So it is the second week in September. We'll have the shire horses there cutting the meadows for 3 days, and it will be a wonderful sight. So please do come along and see it. We'll be handing out information and maybe small packets of wildflower seeds so that you can get involved and try and do something on a smaller scale at home.
Yes, I don't think a shire horse would fit in my fourth floor.
No, I don't think.
I'd love to see it in the window box. Yes, I think the questions are starting to dry up. So we also mentioned earlier the conservation volunteers, which is a project that's starting in winter. Is that correct?
Yeah. So now that we're kind of mainly through the project, we were hoping to start a conservation project on the Fridays. So this will involve doing lots of environmentally friendly jobs in the park. It might be dead hedging, it might be planting hedges, it might be putting up bird and bat boxes. It will, and maybe even planting plugs, wildflower plugs in the meadows. So there's a range of things that we want to do. So we'll be looking to recruit people who are specifically interested in conservation volunteering, and that will be on a Friday. And it will just add to, our wonderful environment at Marble Hill Park and increase the habitats for wildlife, which is crucial. So, yeah.
But that's several months in advance.
That's several months in advance. We won't be advertising it for it yet, but if you keep looking on the website, we will probably start advertising in September for those kind of roles. Yeah.
And in the meantime, I think there's a more immediate need for people to come and thread poppies. So the yes. Wonderful Marble Hill Remembered from last year. I can't remember the number of poppies you've got to thread, but there was a call for volunteers. So if anyone wants to help Marble Hill prepare for this year's Remembrance Day, there's an opportunity to come and thread some poppies, I understand.
Yes.
879 of them, so I'm assuming we don't bring our own thread. And then there's also a call for volunteers to help out over the events programme in August. But you can get in touch with us or with Rachel at English Heritage, and we'll forward on your details. But that's not biodiversity. So I think we'll probably draw it to a close. But I just wanted to thank you for a fantastic talk.
Thank you.